After nearly 7 years in charge, Brentford manager Thomas Frank looks set to soon no longer be Brentford manager Thomas Frank and become Tottenham manager Thomas Frank. And will the departure of the talismanic Danish boss be the most significant obstacle in Brentford's incredible rise up the English pyramid? Just consistent improvement year on year on year on year for about a decade now. Could this be the start of challenging times for the Bees? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I will give you mine. And I think the first thing to say is, in my period here on YouTube, so we're going back to about 2017, covering football and starting there with the Championship, Brentford have barely put a foot wrong, haven't they? I always say on the channel, it's one of my mantras, that a sharp rise is often followed by a sharp fall. And the best way for a club to develop is bit by bit by bit, improving season on season. That is easier said than done. And Brentford have been the absolute poster boys for that. And let's be honest, when I started covering football on YouTube and covering the Championship, Brentford weren't seen as any kind of a threat to the established order. You had the, the kind of parachute payments becoming more powerful and those teams dominating the division during Brentford's rise. And, in spite of that, they still did their thing. But it was this, club that had been traditionally in maybe the third and fourth tiers with their funny little stadium at Griffin Park with the pubs on all the corners and the 18 different stands and attendances under 10,000. People certainly took Brentford less seriously than they do these days, where they are now a very well established Premier League club. How much of that is down to Thomas Frank? Because he took over from Dean Smith, and I've got to say Brentford had a bit of a reputation there. Where does Smith go? In the 18-19 season, he goes and does the Villa job, doesn't he? They've gone 9th, 10th, 9th before that. A reputation for playing very, very lovely football and not necessarily challenging the top six. Think Graham Potter at Swansea, basically. It looks very pretty, but ultimately you needed to stick Steve Cooper in there to actually get them in to the playoffs. And Smith obviously went out to do the Villa job. And I've got to say, when we come round to how hard is this going to be for Brentford, this is the only time the manager changes during this run, where Smith goes out and Frank comes in. And remember, Frank is already in the building working on the staff. So very typically of Brentford, there's beautiful continuity as they go from Smith to Frank. And it does feel like they refine what Smith was doing, and it just becomes, a little bit more ruthless, the football, a little bit more effective. Could you say the recruitment just gets better and better and better, and we start to see just a brilliant team get built? I remember, I've got the on the screen over, I've got the sales of Brentford, and I remember them selling Gray and selling Hogan, Ryan Woods, Jota, I can see down there, Nico Yanaris. God, they get some good money for Odebajo and Egan, all going out to build kind of Thomas Frank's first team, which we all remember as the sort of BMW, don't we? With Ollie Watkins and Brian Mbeumo and Saeed Benrahma. And talking about the end of an era, whatever became of those three, obviously Benrahma was an absolute star in the Championship, went off to West Ham. Watkins, well, brilliant. Aston Villa, and then he was the guy that fired England into the Euros final as well. And perhaps the last one out the door is going to be Brian Mbeumo, who is also negotiating to leave, we think, right now to go to Manchester United. That was a brilliant team. And as we kind of went into the COVID era, we had the first of two playoff appearances. The first one, maybe they weren't quite ready to go up. And when I say about the incremental rise always being better than the really, really steep one, when they're losing that playoff final, remember, it took it to extra time, didn't they? And Joe Bryant scored those couple of free kicks. And Brentford, obviously finishing third, did outrank Fulham in that final. But They stay down for another season, and what happens then? They move stadium, and here comes Ivan Toney, who I did honestly think was the most talismanic person and the face of this story. But given what's happened since Toney left, maybe it wasn't him all along. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was Thomas Frank. And Brentford finished third again, and this time they win the playoffs, beat Steve Cooper's Swansea in the final, for another reference to that. And it did feel that Ivan Toney was kind of the final piece in the jigsaw, this incredibly sort of charismatic, flamboyant striker. Never seen a better penalty taker than him. And I don't know, he was kind of the front man on the pitch. But I do remember in that playoff semi-final, Thomas Frank was there was this kind of growing mythology around him. You all remember just the shots pointing to the watch, and he had the stadium just eating out of the palm of his hand. And you're like, okay, this isn't just a Danish assistant manager that's been popped into the hot seat here. This guy's got a bit about him. And as soon as they get in the Premier League, you realise that he wasn't just continuing the good work done before, because we see this brilliant pivot by Brentford where they go up as this kind of free-flowing, top-scoring, super attacking team in the Championship. And I remember Thomas Frank being on Monday Night Football talking to Dave Jones and Jamie Carragher about this. And he said, right, as soon as they went up, it wasn't about the BMW up front, although I think Ben Rama's gone by that point, hasn't he, and scoring tons of goals. It was about fitness, defence, and set pieces. And all of a sudden, Brentford begins with B. Brentford set the blueprint. Too many B words here, which forces bloopers for Benjamin Bloom. How about that? Brentford set the blueprint for, can you come up, pivot your style, and become hard to beat and hard to play against and leverage home form. And man, if you've got to put some long throw-ins and some corners in the box to score some goals and get yourself to 33, 34, 35 points for survival, well, don't worry about that. If you're Brentford 13th, 9th, 16th and 10th, then if you've got to do that, then that is what you've got to do. And so much criticism even this season for Ipswich and Southampton and Leicester, who, some of the mainstream punditry is a little bit reductive about it, but hey, maybe if they'd been a little bit more Brentford under Thomas Frank, then they wouldn't be back in the Championship this season, or they certainly would have made a better fist of it. But I wondered whether I needed to be making this video last season. Is it the end of an era at Brentford because of the departure of Ivan Toney? But absolutely not. Brentford say, nope. Away we go, straight on. Here we go. Visser, loads of goals. And Bomo, loads of goals. And, not only do they not drop off from 16th, they go up 6 places and finish in 10th. They've been absolutely brilliant. So on the positive side for Brentford is that people have come and gone during this run, and it hasn't made the slightest amount of difference because, 9th, 10th, 9th, 11th, and then 3rd, losing the playoffs 3rd, win the playoffs 13th, 9th, 16th, 10th. Just the line, I know there's the odd little up and down, but the line is going like that every year. And this is in spite of Toney, Watkins, Raya, Ben Rama, Mopai, Mepham, Konza, Gray, Hogan, Flecken, Woods, Potter, Bidstrup, Yanaris, Sodabajo. I've just got their sales. They're all over the last 6-7 years there. Players that have just come and go. They've traded absolutely brilliantly. But only one manager has gone. And it was in the Championship when Brentford had just finished 9th. And it was Dean Smith for Thomas Frank. And had Dean Smith built up such a mythology at that point that he was going to be so hard to replace? I don't know. Certainly not to the point that Thomas Frank has now. So, how's it going to go for Brentford? You can let me know how you think Frank will do at Spurs as well. But, here's a typical Brentford scenario. And this depends whether Thomas Frank is able to take his backroom staff. I think the guy's Cochrane, who's the assistant, because the most Brentford thing in the world would be to block Spurs from taking him and make him the manager, and nothing changes and everything's fine. And here comes some players we've never heard of from Scandinavia and from Africa, and they're absolutely brilliant. And on we go. And Brentford are just established for the next another decade or whatever up in the Premier League. And let's be honest, it's more like 2, 3, 4 decades to then establish the elite. But right now, can you just be in the top 10 in the Premier League? That is an outstanding achievement for Brentford. Can they do that? Can they bring in a manager, I don't know, from the EFL? Danny Roll, Kieran McKenna, please no. I don't know. You name names. Is there someone in Scandinavia that's on Matthew Benham's data dashboard there? I don't know. Could be a fascinating one. So the best case scenario is that Brentford just hold course, and this is not about a charismatic, brilliant, tactically innovative, manager where everything clings to him, and it is about the culture, about the system, about the strategy. And it doesn't matter that Frank's going and they're going to be okay. But if he is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, then could you get the drop off? All it takes, we know, is one bad season, one bad hire, one bad transfer window, and the Premier League can eat you alive. And a lot of the good work can disappear immediately, can't it? And so much of, I say so much of Brentford's Premier League. Why can't I talk today? Premier League. So much of Brentford's Premier League tenure is attached to Thomas Frank. Well, 100%. He's managed every single game they've done in the Premier League, right from the word go. Well, I think they beat Arsenal straight away, didn't they? And that set the tone of, we are here to be taken seriously. Which scenario do you think it's going to go? Is it going to be typical Brentford and it won't make a difference? Or is this going to be a bit more of a struggle than losing Tony, losing Watkins, or indeed Dean Smith, the other manager, to go during this brilliant run over the last 7 or 8 years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments as we wind up for Thomas Frank's impending move for Brentford to Tottenham. And does that mean impending doom for the Bees? I hope not. You never know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.